from New Jersey, and I moved out to West Virginia about 2 years ago with my wife Kelly, and we live off the grid on a ridge in the woods. And we're in the process of homesteading, growing as much food as possible for ourselves, building our house with our bare hands from scratch. So if you felt you've received any value from this presentation today, please consider making a donation of $5 or whatever you can. And my wife made some homemade pickles here, and you'll get pickles in exchange for a donation, and it would really help us out towards our homesteading efforts. I am pretty much ready when Brandon is.
You're good.
Go ahead.
And I'll take some pickles, and I'll donate.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I will too.
Tony will too.
If somebody else can have the pickles, I want the pickles.
You don't want the pickles?
No, somebody
I'll
can
take
have
the
pickles.
freaking pickles.
There you go. You got double pickles.
They're good. Oh, look.
Blessing,
They're good. I tasted them.
Okay, so let's begin. The title of this presentation is called Rising Above the Manufactured Civil War in America.
Wow.
My one disclaimer is that everybody here is encouraged and advised to further research the information I'm going to present today on your own time. Don't take my word for it. Seek the truth for yourself. That's it. The info presented today is far from complete. The scope is vast. So I only have an hour. I'm going to cover a lot of information, and please know that this information is not in its entirety. I want to begin with a quote by one of my favorite authors and researchers, David Icke. And these words perfectly embody what this presentation is about, as well as what's going on in the world. In his book, The Biggest Secret, David Icke says, "When we give our minds and our responsibility away, we give our lives away. If enough of us do it, we give the world away. And that is precisely what we've been doing throughout known human history. This is why the few have always controlled the masses. The foundation of that control has always been the same. Keep the people in ignorance, fear, and at war with themselves. Divide, rule, and conquer while keeping the most important knowledge to yourself." This is the theme of the presentation. In the event you all haven't been paying attention, right now in America there are conscious efforts being made from high places to cause division amongst the people, amongst us, to cause civil unrest and drastically change our society. They want to divide us by race, especially race, religion, political affiliation, your income class, you name it. Pick a category. They want to seek to divide us through these means. We see these attempts to cause division coming from media, government, and our own fellow Americans who believe the stories fed to them by media and government. And the so-called problems facing our world that are based on these divisions and the so-called solutions to these problems, they won't benefit humanity because the problems and the solutions are based in illusion. And I'll discuss what these illusions are. And our belief that these illusions are real, which I will also get into. There's one especially dangerous illusion that I'll be discussing that's constantly being fed to us. So long as we continue believing in illusions, humanity will continue to be divided and controlled and will never identify who is really holding humanity back and what's holding human consciousness back. So while I make the charge that the Civil War in America is being manufactured, make no mistake about it. There is a civil war. There is a polarization going on many levels. There is an authentic mounting division amongst Americans, which represents a polarization in the collective consciousness of humanity, as well as a polarization that's taking place within the psyche of many of us. On another level, struggles occurring on the rulers and within the shadow government levels, if you will. This struggle and division of consciousness is witnessed on many levels, which illustrates the natural law, or a universal law called correspondence, which basically means that the universe is self-similar on many levels. So as the quote here to exemplify this is, as above, so below. In this instance, what can be said is, as without, so within, or as within, so without. So you might ask yourself, how do I know if I'm falling for this civil war in America? Well, if you subscribe to the idea that human beings are in one way or another separate from each other, and or if you support ideas which validate and promote the illusion of separateness, then you are being fooled. While many have bought into this charade, I know that others, such as yourselves, probably are not. But you probably know someone in your life heavily caught up in this. And it's my hope that this presentation helps you to better understand this manufactured civil war, so that you can help your friends and family in your circle wake up to it and rise above it.
Thank you.
Sorry, I have a freeze here. Okay, all right, this next section I'm calling the matrix. So think about the version of reality that we're all experiencing. We're told that this is it, that there's nothing more to imagine. On this planet, within our shared reality, there's no time or place for using your imagination to explore those meaningful and those fundamental issues that plague human beings and that plague the planet. And we can't use our imagination to come up with solutions that go beyond your normal everyday problem solving. It's just not encouraged in our society. It's not appropriate to question why we have to live on this planet as slaves, subject to belief systems such as authority and money. It's not appropriate to question the human condition on this planet, the nature of money, why we have to pay money to live here, rather than questioning the nature of these systems, which are false in nature, meaning they don't exist in nature. Everyone is immersed in them instead. I feel like this baby over here some days, and the baby's saying, if you can't read it, so you're telling me I have to earn money for the rest of my life just to live here? I always half-jokingly ask, why are we the only species on this planet that have to pay to live here? So you can't question or challenge all the laws that we're supposed to follow that they pass in this building here on the left. And you most certainly can't resist when these guys on the right want to enforce those laws. And don't you dare question this God and its dominion over your life. Don't even think about asking why when it comes to the necessity of a money system. So what this all amounts to, since the deep and meaningful questions are not asked and explored by most, the mind is not imagining new possibilities. It's not imagining all that can be. The imagination is suppressed. Consciousness is suppressed. And this is why these perpetual systems are evil and why they must go. These systems, they don't serve us. They don't serve humanity in a positive manner. Money and government, or authority, keep us constantly rooted in fear, anxiety, and anger, which amounts to stress on the human body. Constantly dwelling in such states of consciousness suppresses our imagination, perpetuates this stressful condition, and promotes disease. In other words, the system is literally killing us. That's why it's evil. That's why it needs to go. In this state of consciousness, humans cannot fully express themselves to their truest potential. So fear and anger, which is the system, equals stress, which equals dis-ease. They want to create as much dis-ease and disharmony as possible. So what we have is a suppressed imagination. And with a suppressed imagination and the belief in illusion, humans unknowingly find themselves in a compromised position where their genuine concern for humanity and the planet, it's been consigned to solving trivial, more compartmentalized problems at best. A suppressed human mind will only explore what it has come to know while struggling to think outside the box. So if we can't imagine infinite possibilities and be able to apply them in the real world, then we wind up with a second-rate experience of life, a second-rate experience of reality at best. It's a limited reality, and it's one that's being fed to us by someone else, external forces. The suppressed mind cannot even imagine new evolutionary ideas. You're stuck dealing with symptoms and never addressing the problem, the root cause. And as this last bullet point explains, such efforts come from a place of no power. So, the slavery of humanity will continue so long as authority and money remain in effect, along with an unconscious and irresponsible people. We'll never have real paradigm shifting change so long as these structures are in place. Keep this in mind as we move forward in the presentation. And here are great visual depictions of a society with a suppressed imagination. The people find themselves in a peculiar position where their power and free will are illusions and severely cheapened at best. So on the right here, the cow has the illusion of free choice in our systematic society. He can choose the left or the right when it all leads to the same slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
And I love this picture on the right. The child in the back seat with the toy steering wheel thinking he's in control of the car, which is a great representation of our voting system. And this meme says, voting, giving grown adults the illusion of control. That's our system. That's our world. That's the reality. We dwell in illusions such as these. That we have free choice to choose between Democrat and Republican, Wendy's or McDonald's. And that our choice is actually going to make a real world difference. So when you're believing in illusions with a suppressed consciousness, you're asking government to fix government, which is essentially like asking cancer to cure cancer. Can't happen. It's an oxymoron. So I want to get into this next segment, which is called the Law of One. What is the Law of One? This should be taught in Life 101, the first day of life. The Law of One is the oneness of humanity. It's the understanding that beyond the flesh of all of us, each of us are individual units of consciousness or individual units of expression. And each of us, when we come together, we create our shared reality, which represents a unity, a collective consciousness. The oneness of humanity also means that human beings were all made of the same stuff, both physically and metaphysically. We're one. Humans are one in thought, emotion, and action. Mind, body, and soul. We're totally interdependent and interconnected. In other words, human beings are one with each other and all of creation. This is the Law of One. Now, this sounds like it's inherent knowledge, and it is, but we're all out here, and I'm not charging you folks with it, you in general, we're out here acting as if we're all separate from each other, and we're all distrusting of each other, and we're all enemies. I want to share a quote from Zane, who I call master teacher. Zane was alleged to have been a teacher at the Children of the Law of One monastery, which was once situated in a remote location deep in the mountains of Tibet, said to have been nearly impossible to find. As the story goes, Zane taught John Peniel, who traveled far and wide and found the monastery, and went on to write the book, The Children of the Law of One, The Lost Teachings of Atlantis, which has been the most important book that I ever read, and I encourage everyone to find a copy of this book. It taught me to understand what you all may be familiar with called natural law, universal moral law, but it also taught me true spirituality in the sense that it taught me spiritual street smarts. It taught me the hard knock spirituality that you won't find in most New Age teachings of the Law of One. Years ago, I found the book in a thrift shop with my wife. I just stumbled upon it. I wasn't even looking for it. It's an amazing book. It's Mark Passio's knowledge put into a book, I would say. Zane said most people have their share of personal problems, which are a microcosm of the world's problems. Personal problems come from the same place that the world's problems do, which is the belief that humans are separate from one another. That is the root of all roots of all problems. So as a rule of thumb, if you believe that humans are separate, you're believing in a lie and you're believing in an illusion. This belief causes a separate self-consciousness as opposed to a unity universal consciousness. So we'll look at this as separate self-consciousness. So another thing to keep in mind as we're moving forward, anything that causes us to disconnect from that oneness, it's an illusion. It's a lie. So the separate self-consciousness, let's talk about a little bit what this is. It's a point of view that's limited to seeing things from only one place, the place where the separate self is. And that leads to a limited understanding of things. It boxes its perceptions of the world into pieces that are extensions of itself. And it doesn't mean you're actually separate, but rather you believe in this illusion of separateness. So, when you're in a separate self-consciousness, you're seeing things from one place. You're not able to see the whole picture. You're not able to see the big picture. Take a classic car, for example. Two people are approaching the car from different sides. One side of the car is all smashed up and dented. The other side of the car is immaculate. The guy approaching the car, who sees it dented and smashed, thinks the car is a piece of shit and it's worthless. While the other person approaching the car sees the car as immaculate and, worth tens of thousands of dollars. Different point of views, both right, both wrong. When the entire car is seen, you can grasp the greater truth about the car. So this example shows how we can see the whole truth if we get above and beyond individuals' points of view. And only then can we see the whole picture. Having a point of view that is as broad as possible allows us to better perceive reality and to see more truth. It can help us to better understand others, the world, and our entire universe. If our point of view is broad enough, we can understand other points of views. Then we can more easily communicate and interact with others, and they can more easily communicate with us. So I have to make a disclaimer about when I speak of oneness, the oneness of humanity. Please don't let these teachings be misunderstood as promoting a one world government or a religion where oneness and peace are enforced by human rule or dogma. Nothing could be further from what is meant to be conveyed. First of all, I'm a proponent of freedom and free will. So when I speak of the concept of oneness, I'm speaking about an internal way of being. A consciousness that includes compassion and freedom and caring about all people, all creatures, all creation, as much as you do about yourself. So this meme, some of you may have seen it on the internet, globalism. What we're told it is, people kumbayaing around the planet holding hands. But what it really is, a bunch of dark suit and tie, dark rulers conspiring to centralize more power and control. So let's not twist this oneness. And when you go against the law of one and believe in illusion of separateness, you will by nature, you will become selfish. And when you're selfish, you take on an alter identity. This alter ego, which Zane has called the separate, selfish self. So once again, another quote from Zane. He said, "At the root of selfishness is our illusion that we are not one with all things, all life, the entire universe, and our subsequent belief that this illusion is real. This belief created a new identity and supports the existence of this new separate identity that is naturally selfish. And therein lies the enemy. But our belief is a lie. The illusion is not real." This new identity that is naturally bred from believing in the illusion of separateness, we'll call this individual the selfish separate self. The selfish separate self is self-indulgent and self-absorbed. His or her world and what's happening within and around it is all that ultimately matters to him or her. The selfish self looks upon the world and other individuals as separate from and unrelated to him. They feel no connection to the rest of humanity. They think of giving and doing for others only in terms of what's in it for me. The selfish self does not care about anything other than whether or not his needs are being met. The selfish separate self is a false type of human. It's an illusion driven by the ego mind, who has lost awareness of his true nature, the oneness of humanity, and consequently his connectedness to all of creation. So symbolically, this is what's going on within the collective of humanity, as well as within the individual who dwells in selfish separate consciousness. The mind is fragmented, it's compartmentalized, it's imprisoned, and it's thus divided against himself and all of creation. So as we move on from this segment, we need to remember that to believe we are separate from one another is an illusion and therefore wrong. And it's wrong because it's not based in truth, and it's not in harmony with universal law. So let's move on to the next section and take a look at the mind control that induces our separate selfish world. Research reveals that up to 98% of our thoughts, emotional responses, and actions are dictated by the subconscious mind. And other research reveals that human behavior is 93% predictable. If it's that much predictable, it's able to be controlled. We are conditioned or brainwashed, if you will, by culture, family, society, and our own experiences. Much of our programming, much of our brainwashing, especially what's being absorbed by our subconscious mind, it's out of our control, if and when we're not aware of it. This is why claims are made that free will doesn't exist, because we're influenced by information which is out of our range of awareness, which therefore causes us to make unconscious decisions. According to conventional physics, there is no freedom. It's not possible. It's a fantasy. Of course, if you know who you are, then you will reject such nonsense. But the fact of the matter is, you are being brainwashed. Edward Bernays is known as the father of public relations, and public relations is euphemism for propaganda. So I call him the father of propaganda, as well as others. Bernays knew a few things about the subconscious mind, as well as the group mind. And he had this to say about mind control. If we understand the mechanism and motives of the group mind, it is now possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without them knowing it. Small groups of persons can and do make the rest of us think what they please about a given subject. If you don't know who Edward Bernays is, well, you should. He was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, the famous psychoanalyst. Bernays claimed that public relations or propaganda is not a gimmick, but a necessity. And his research and practices help create what we live in today. There are other individuals who also study human thought, emotion, and behavior in great depths and work to manipulate them. And many of these individuals offer their knowledge to corporations and governments. So the efforts to control your mind are not merely to get you to buy a product, but also to get you to buy into political ideologies.
Primarily.
Correct, primarily. So propaganda was and still is an effective method of controlling public opinion. Let's look at what propaganda is in its traditional classic sense. Propaganda is known as information, especially of a biased or misleading nature, used to promote or publicize a particular political cause or view. But now we live in the digital and information age, where information is coming at light speed and it's at our fingertips. So it's up to us to discern it. So propaganda had to evolve with this information age. So the new propaganda campaign, or what is called modern propaganda, focuses on bombarding the individual with all sorts of information on any given subject or story. Some of it may be true, while most of it is false. And if you're not able to discern truth and get to the bottom of the story, then you'll find yourself with tons of amounts of conflicting, confusing, and unverified information, which is designed to get you to shut down. That's what cognitive dissonance does to you. So that's the new modern propaganda. Garry Kasparov, a famous chess player and activist, he explains it pretty well in this quote. The point of modern propaganda isn't only to misinform or push an agenda, but it's to exhaust your critical thinking, to annihilate truth. This modern form of propaganda is designed to dissuade you from thinking and discovering independent and critically. They want you to give up your free will and shift into auto-think, which leads to groupthink, where your thoughts and feelings merge and take on the opinions of the group mind, the opinion of popular thought. When an individual aligns their beliefs and values with popular opinion, it makes taking a stance that much easier. Because after all, the majority can't be wrong, right? Wrong. Mark Twain said, whenever you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to pause and reflect. And I agree. So let's look at some of the agencies that use propaganda. The CIA and corporate media have been working together on propaganda for decades. Together, they dictate what news is presented, essentially controlling what we're allowed to see and know about, while controlling the facts as well as the emotional tone of the story. Information war tactics or propaganda are waged on the collective mind by the CIA and media. A good place to start researching the CIA's close workings with the media in order to dictate public opinion is the excellent article by James F. Tracy called The CIA and the Media, 50 Facts the World Needs to Know. A great article to get you started on this conspiracy.
You should, that's why I started the CIA, is because I did a bunch of research into the Kennedy assassination. And the last thing Kennedy did before he was killed was sign an order miss out of Vietnam. And he was investigating who makes the money? Federal Reserve. He was investigating the Federal Reserve deeply and trying to eliminate the Federal Reserve. And basically George Bush Sr. ordered his killing, and that's really the last real president that we've actually had in this country. And that's why I started the CIA, the Citizens Instigating Anarchy. And another guy you just talked about, his name is Bob Harris. He had an IQ of 238, and he wrote about the Kennedy assassination. You remember that, Brendan?
Yep.
And it was brilliant. Brilliant. And he had IQ 238. And he was trying to do research for his comedy act. And he went and did all this research and he found out. And yeah, Bob Harris. Look him up. It's pretty epic.
Will do.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. So this CIA media relationship also includes the big tech giants and internet social media giants like Facebook and Google. Look into Facebook's infamous mood experiments, where they discovered human emotion can be predicted and manipulated simply by controlling your Facebook feed. What you see and read when you pull up your Facebook account.
They don't like me.
They will dictate your mood for the day and feed you the information. Think about that. So, what is the reality machine currently, presently feeding us? Well, let's look at it. Everyday racism in America. No Trump. No fascists. Gun control. Take away the guns. The Russian connection. My favorite, intersectionality. Your class, your gender, your education, your religion, etc. And another one, the left's hatred, the left's unhinged. All this stuff. It's meant to generate emotional responses from us. It's meant to pull us into this charade, to pick a side, to go against our fellow brothers and sisters. So, by not being aware of how the subconscious mind works and the external programming that influences us every day of our lives, we're leaving our programming up to others, outside factors, and out of our control. Our most important human faculties are left to chance. Worse, it's left to the dark rulers of this planet. Zane, once again, said, once one realizes the full significance that all the people in the world are basically robots running on programming deliberately designed by others or haphazardly created, but usually a mix of both, it becomes clear that we must analyze our beliefs and feelings about things from as high a state of consciousness as possible and reprogram ourselves. What Zane is saying here essentially is that we need to reclaim our mind. We need to reclaim our mind and reprogram ourselves. We do this by being aware of and analyzing and taking control over our own thoughts, feelings, and actions, or they will be surrendered to the will of another. We need to understand that real and evolutionary results cannot come through illusory measures such as politics and monetary reform. We need to understand that the present polarization in America is not a natural consequence of democracy. It's being artificially engineered to cause chaos. And we need to know that the so-called differences between the left and right are illusory and at best trivial and a diversion from the powers that be, where a large portion of our problems in the world stem from, and the present control system over humanity. So in order to understand the civil war taking place in America, we need to understand and look at civil wars and government overthrows, how they transpired in other countries. First, it's no secret that the US government has and continues to go all over the world and change a nation's leader, its government, and its society such that it favors US policy, which is the one world tyrannical policy. See, the public is told that our government goes around the world and does this in the name of bringing democracy to oppressed nations, or what they call democracy assistance. What they're really doing is disturbing a nation and its people and their will in order to push their own agendas. And they'll go so far as to instigate hate, fear, division, cause civil unrest and riots and violence in that country, and have people lose their lives and freedom, whatever it takes to get their way. It's sick and preposterous is what it is. And it's not just the US government that has an interest in changing a country's leader or its government. Billionaires like George Soros, who we will get into today, work together with the US government in these overthrows and installing of puppet leaders. Both George Soros and the US government use what are called non-governmental organizations, or NGOs, which operate under the guise of advocating for democracy and human rights around the world, but they're actually working to advance this covert agenda of US hegemony. They never create real, actual, everlasting change throughout these nations that they intervene in, since the framework never changes, as we've discussed. They create fake revolutions, fake rebellions, under the guise of democracy. These revolutions are often called color revolutions. So let's look at what a color revolution is. It's a term related to movements that developed in several societies in the former Soviet Union and the Balkans during the early 2000s. The term has also been applied to a number of revolutions elsewhere, including in the Middle East, also known as a soft revolution. So all these Eastern European countries and even the Middle Eastern countries that are having their Arab Spring moment, and you see all this turmoil and uprising and trying to overthrow different leaders in different countries, know that our government is behind these movements, behind this chaos generating. They're not grassroots movements, they're not authentic, they're not ground up. They're heavily funded. They have endless resources because they're working with the government through non-governmental organizations. So it's interesting that they're calling these things color revolutions. So let's look at the word color and where it comes from. It's a Latin verb, which stands for colorare, and it means that which hides the real character of something. And we look at the word colorable from the late 14th century, which means specious, giving a false appearance of something of being right to what is in fact unjustifiable. So a color revolution is a false revolution. Color revolutions can last for years and are sometimes designed to, like in the Ukraine, where that color revolution took a full 10 years of chaos and unrest before that government was overthrown. See, these revolutions are always just that, revolutionary, never evolutionary. As the old saying goes, new boss, same as the old boss. But to the rulers and the world shapers, however, each revolution is an evolution of their vision inching towards a more centralized world of control. So let's look at one of the influencers to these color revolutions around the world, and who's doing the influencing in America right now. Mr. George Soros. Oh my goodness. George Soros is a Hungarian businessman, investor, and financier. He's worth about $26 billion. He made $1 billion overnight. In 1998, George Soros gave an interview to 60 Minutes where he acknowledged his efforts as a child helping the Nazis by confiscating property from the Jews. Looking back on this moment in time, he told 60 Minutes that he felt no guilt for what he did. And despite being Jewish himself, and easily could have been the one whose property was being taken from him, he reasoned that if he wasn't doing the confiscation, someone else would be. Calling himself a mere spectator in the face of physical acts. That's the logic of a psychopath, folks. The man also believes he's a god. And that's a quote. But yet, he doesn't believe in God himself. It's quite a humble and modest self-image, what do you say?
He just looks evil.
Oh,
Yeah.
He looks like evil.
Soros is deeply connected to the upper echelons of Wall Street and finance and politics and government and corporate media. Of his many notable ventures, he started the Open Society Foundations, which is a network of more than 30 international groups that advocate for certain social, economic, and political causes. These causes that Soros favors and supports and advocates for, they can be considered as heavily progressive causes on par with the New World Order globalist vision, which, if manifested, it will not bode well for freedom of the individual. With respect to America, he's quoted as saying, "It is the main obstacle to a stable and just world." America is. He doesn't like the way things are structured in this country, both politically and socially. Keep in mind, Soros is not coming from a humanitarian, truly philanthropic point of view, but from a progressive, globalist, tycoonist, control-hungry, psychopathic point of view.
And he has a son.
He does. Soros is quoted as saying, "Discern the chaos and become rich." Although he was referring to the financial markets in this quote, it's apparent that Soros loves chaos in all areas of his life, because that's where he thrives the most. Soros understands that he can become more rich and powerful through chaos. Chaos in terms of destabilizing governments, markets, and societies. Not only does the present structure of America's government and its culture serve as a hurdle to Soros and the likes, but specifically Donald Trump and the people and groups that he surrounds himself with directly stand in his way. Soros and those who align with his vision for the US and the world will stop at nothing to remove Trump from office and effect a political shift in the US, complete with dramatic reform and drastic changes to our society, such as the erosion of freedom and the individual and more centralized control.
He got admitted he's going to take out Trump before 2020. So
That's right.
Say that again.
he's already admitted in his video, admitting that he's going to take Trump out before 2020.
And we'll look at this. One of the ways
You
Soros.
have slavery. As long as you have any government, you have slavery.
Correct.
Period.
Correct. So that's why Soros' efforts against Trump and Trump's efforts against the communists and globalists, it's not our battle. This isn't our reality. It's their reality.
Right.
It's theirs. And they're trying to bring it to our world. So one of the ways Soros is manufacturing a civil war in America is through media manipulation and propaganda. There's a document by Media Matters that was leaked to the public. Media Matters is a far-left media watchdog and think tank organization which Soros funds to the tune of millions. The document is called Democracy Matters, Strategic Plan for Action. It reads like an anti-Donald Trump media playbook. It was created by, allegedly, David Brock, the founder of Media Matters, and it reads like a subversive political call to action, a manifesto of sorts. But the plan is pretty straightforward: to oppose Donald Trump's presidency at all costs and by all means necessary through a non-stop media war assault all day, every day. If you've been witnessing in the media and on social media, the plan is in full swing. Whether or not you like Trump, most of us are probably apolitical here, but if you look at it for what it is, 90% negative coverage against Trump in the media. You think there's a bias?
They laughed at him from the beginning.
It's called mind control.
Ist meine Fiera.
Swore to God that he wouldn't
Yeah.
make it.
And this negative media coverage of Trump is in line with the playbook. So to say that people aren't behind this would be inaccurate. So we've discussed Soros' media efforts through propaganda, but Soros is also involved in the direct action efforts, the street level efforts, such as supporting violent, racist, extremist groups. I like to call this the Soros Interference Network. Some reporters and media outlets obtained documents and meetings and tax records of Soros' Open Society Institute, and it provides a glimpse into some of the specific groups and causes that Soros funds, either directly or indirectly. So let's look at a couple of the most notable ones. Black Lives Matter. We're told that Black Lives Matter is an international activist movement that campaigns against violence and systemic racism towards black people. The ranks include self-professed anarchists, who are nothing of the sort, communists and socialists. They engage in violent protests, which include property damage and physical violence.
Division's in the name. Division's right in the name. Single them out. Yeah.
Following the protests and riots in Baltimore in 2015, due to the death of Freddie Gray, if you all remember that, the Soros Interference Network viewed the unrest as a unique opportunity for social change and gave $650,000 to the Black Lives Matter Baltimore faction. $650,000. You could do a lot with that. And then we had the riots in Ferguson, Missouri. Soros invested $33 million into that incident alone to cause unrest after the death of Michael Brown. So in case you're wondering why exactly the shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, Middle America, became a national news story, it's not because it reveals any inherent racism in the system. Rather, it's because dedicated, interconnected groups of outside agitators, namely Soros, roused their mobs while the media spun the story and turned the death of Michael Brown into a national scandal. I'm not here to say that racism doesn't exist, but we need to recognize when race and racism are being exaggerated, exploited, weaponized, and used to create further hatred and division. Very important to keep in mind. Let's look at another charming group, Antifa. Antifa, whose name derives from the anti-fascist movement in Europe, is a militant, far left-wing extremist movement that protests and riots against fascism, capitalism, racism, bigotry, and of course, Donald Trump. Their ranks include self-professed anarchists, who are nothing of the sort. These people aren't even Democrats. They're radical communists, socialists, and social justice, not warriors, but extremists. They engage in violent protests, which include shutting down the free speech of others whose opinions they don't like, causing property damage, and physical violence. Through Soros' Open Society Institute, he gave over $100,000 to a group called the Alliance for Global Justice, who in turn gave $50,000 to Refuse Fascism, and Refuse Fascism is an unincorporated Antifa group. And I'm sure he's given more. We're even seeing evidence that they're paying protesters on the street level to go cause issues.
Still at it.
Make no mistake about it, these people want to destroy America and what's left of what's great of America. They want to overthrow the government, which I don't blame them, but they want to help usher in their dystopian worldview, which appears from these pictures to be aligned with Soviet Russia. And there are no angels either. You see this sign on the left. It takes a bullet to bash a fascist. And if you can't read this Antifa flyer on the right, I'll read it for you. It says, "The evil white race must be destroyed. The white race and their heathen masters must be purged from the face of the earth." Mind you, most of Antifa members are white themselves. The children of the white races are the future of the white race. This is where we must begin and end. With Trump in power, it is far too late for conversion of the racist children. Thus, we are left with only one option, to do what must be done. But take heart, after the purge, we will live in a workers' paradise free from racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, and oppression. What the hell? Where are they living? And who taught them about communism? That it's such a utopia. So, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and the likes, this is what they promote. This is what they push. This is what they shout all day, every day. Everyday racism in America. The class struggle is real. Battle of the sexes. Does this sound familiar? Where are they getting this from? They're getting it from Soros. They're getting it from his interference network. They're getting it from the media.
Facebook.
Facebook.
Everywhere.
I have a video where Mark Zuckerberg admits he works for the CIA.
And he's a cyborg.
So let's get into this revolution in America.
From the future.
It's called the Purple Revolution, and it's also known as the Resistance.
Great.
It is controlled by
Upon Donald Trump being elected as President of the United States, Soros, Hillary, and the high-positioned people who share the same vision as them launched a color revolution effort in America, which some are calling the Purple Revolution.
There you go.
The Purple Revolution's main intent is to destroy Trump at all costs. The day after losing to Trump in the 2016 presidential election, Clinton appeared before the media with both her and Bill donning purple articles of clothing. Clinton's spokespeople claimed it was to represent the coming together of Democratic blue America and Republican red America into a united purple blend. Oh, the coming together of the left and right, huh? Is that euphemism for civil war? What color is skin that's badly bruised? The color purple can represent many things. It has many occult meanings behind it. It was a symbol of royalty for kings and queens because it was very expensive to get purple dye. The color purple can also represent penance, self-punishment, repentance, feeling sorry, and a renewal. The Purple Revolution will also seek to make the Trump administration one term through Soros-style street protests and political disruption, as we are witnessing. And it's ramping up as we head towards the midterm elections. Expect things to intensify between now and November, folks, and beyond, especially if the Democrats do not fare well in these elections. This is the anti-Trump movement, also known as the Resistance. So, this is how the Resistance began. This is what it looked like. People took to the streets, resist Trump. Fine and well, right? Let's even throw in a communist flag. Show them how dedicated we are and how sincere we are. Stop Trump. Join the resistance. But then it got ugly. The women started crying.
Great.
They didn't have their Hillary.
I wonder how much they were
They
paid.
started wearing pussy costumes. And I don't want to know where they got the pubic hair for these costumes.
Somebody's paying them a lot of money.
But it got uglier. Fuck Trump and fuck you for voting for him. And it got uglier. The artists came out. They were just merely expressing themselves. This is art. It's creative. This is becoming normalized to depict someone in this manner. Whether or not you like this guy, Trump, that doesn't matter. To wish death on someone, violent death, is sick. This is the goal of the resistance if all the other civilized means fail. And if you're in this reality, you're forced to choose a side.
Right.
The side that's either for Trump or against Trump. But if you're rising above this charade to see it for what it is, you know that both sides are illusions and they only cause more division and hate.
Right.
And that all the outcomes of this political charade, they're going to generate more chaos and suffering. So we looked at what they call Trump derangement syndrome. we need to look at the Trump obsession syndrome. So we can see this thing from both points of view. And I call this section the cult of Donald Trump. Look at this picture.
Yeah.
He's heaven sent. He's sent from God. He's gonna make America great again single-handedly, just with the smile, just with the smirk alone. He's an angel.
Well, they do this with all politicians.
That's right. That's right. It's no different. But come on, I mean, this time it's going to be different. He's going to MAGA. He's going to make America great again. He's going after the communists, guys. I mean, he's got to be great. He's going after the globalists.
Yeah, him or Hillary. He's like,
I mean, it's hard to choose
That's
which
what you eat.
communist you like better.
And come on, can you argue with this? He was sent by Jesus. Do you thank Jesus every day for President Trump? Are you that hypnotized like that lady?
She's paid.
Touch me.
You don't know that.
Soros is paying all those people right there.
You don't know that. There's people that are.
No, there's people who love this man.
Yeah.
I didn't make this picture. Somebody made it. And somebody believes this vision of Donald Trump. Guiding his hand as he signs away our rights. As he reauthorizes the National Defense Authorization Act. Jesus is guiding his hand. Don't you worry.
I'll never trust government.
So, we need to understand what I call the gnosis of Donald Trump. The knowledge of what Donald Trump represents. We're seeing with Trump an emergence of nationalism and conservatism and Christian conservatism and patriotism. And we're also seeing the reemergence of the savior myth. We're also seeing an overall renewed confidence in the political process and government itself. Just on a side note before I move on, Donald Trump was able to take the data from all the Ron Paul supporters and cater to them and essentially bring certain folks who were libertarians and on the brink of no longer participating in politics, he was able to reel them in with a lot of nice things like, I'm going after the Federal Reserve. Oh, really?
Yeah. Right.
Leave her alone.
Another lie.
Steve Bannon, who worked for Breitbart, helped Donald Trump obtain Ron Paul's campaign information. So he was able to directly go towards those followers. That's a brilliant political strategy. Ron Paul has tons of supporters.
I liked Ron Paul. My grandmother worked for him,
Yeah,
so I mean, compared to a lot, he never.
sure.
Compared to those other scumbags we get.
Sure. So you can take some of that rhetoric and, Trump can take and pitch it to
And that's what
certain right-wingers and they'll buy it, hook, line, and sinker.
I believe we're going to overcome this.
So with Trump, we're also seeing a renewed sense of gratitude and honor towards the military and law enforcement. And a renewed respect for the rule of law itself. See, what Trump represents, he represents a shift in this struggle, both internally and externally. He seemingly goes against the grain. He's an agitator. He's a troll of the left. He's a no-nonsense, deal-making businessman. He's a sexist. He's a macho man. He's militaristic. He's the antithesis, or the reaction to the present status quo. Even though it's a false version of reality, there's still a polarization taking place. And he represents the antithesis in that world. So whether or not he was put into the presidency by some powerful forces is irrelevant. Trump's the president, and his antithesis status is being used to racially divide and polarize the people. Whether Trump knows it or not himself. So once again, depicting yourself as an agent of change or an outsider, it's a very obvious and clever tactic of politicians who want to get voted in. Nonetheless, Trump is not a friend of humanity. None of them are. They thrive off of this illusory separate reality, this control system. That's where they have power. That's where they feel like they're of any value. So this system, whatever Trump does, it's not going anywhere. We're still going to be slaves under it. Trump's a billionaire who, like Soros, seeks to influence the world according to His and his master's visions. Don't get me started on the evil shit that Donald Trump has done thus far. He's no friend of humanity. I'll just give you guys a clue.
Jeez.
Look into his deep loyalty and connections to Israel.
Right.
I'm going to leave it at that.
So no.
He's trash.
That's right. So this color revolution is part of a larger social control agenda, which has been called a chaos agenda or the strategy of tension. The strategy of tension is a method involving a series of attacks on the population intended to promote fear and stress amongst them. The purpose is by inducing a mistrust of one another and of the world at large, there will be an increase in childlike dependence on authority such as government. Everything is strategically and covertly being fed to you so that you will become polarized either to the left or right or by race or perhaps through another identity group. Not slightly polarized, but incredibly polarized and emotionally unbalanced to the far extreme. Like I said, the intent is to create massive amounts of chaos, social divisions, all of which prevent the development of a real and independent mass protest movement against the seats of power. They don't ever want us to come together and turn on them. So long as we focus on each other, we're losing. They don't want us to figure it out and realize we're being conditioned to hate each other and eventually start turning our energy on those who rule us and those who seek to suppress our consciousness.
John, I don't think anything's
That's it. So let's talk about the civil war going on at the personal level, on the individual level. What's taking place is a polarization of our consciousness expressions, which are referred to as our masculine and feminine faculties, or our yin and yang, or our intuitive or intellectual faculties. These are aspects of human consciousness or aspects of ourselves. So you have the aspect of yourself that controls your creativity, your holistic thought and compassion. That's your feminine faculties or your intuitive faculties. The other aspect of your consciousness is your intellectual side or your masculine side, which deals with logic and analytical thought, science and math. And breaking this down even further, those expressions of consciousness can be broken down into various mental schisms or mental worldviews, how you view the world and how you view yourself. And with regard to these various schisms, they're an imbalance of either way of thinking. If you fall into one or the other, rather than have these work complementary to it leads to mind control. So when these opposite faculties, opposite but complementary faculties of the individual are not in cooperation, they're not in harmony with each other, the individual is not in harmony with himself. He's divided amongst himself, and he's therefore without power. So this is also reflected in society on a collective level. So if the individual is polarized and at war with himself, then it follows that society will be also. As we previously discussed, the Hermetic principle of correspondence, as above, so below. In this case, it's as within, so without. The outside world is a reflection of what's going on internally within ourselves. So we have a civil war going on, or many of us do. Many of us struggle with our left and right brain. So in addition to working out and harmonizing your consciousness expressions and your mental schisms, there's what many call doing your shadow work. And shadow work is called the process of exploring your inner darkness or your shadow self. Shadow work uncovers every part of you that has been disowned, repressed, and rejected. It's one of the most authentic paths to enlightenment. So shadow work is identifying your past unresolved traumatic issues that have defined and shaped who you are. And it also deals with identifying your own shortcomings, particularly where you're selfish, and working to correct them. And doing the shadow work also includes accepting responsibility for what you create in your own life, both good and bad, and accepting responsibility for what you help create in society with other human beings. So make no mistake, folks, this is what it's all about. Divide and conquer. Divided by religion, divided by borders, divided by politics. And George Carlin at the bottom here is saying, anyone else starting to suspect that we're easier to control if we're divided? We're all being played, divide and conquer. If they keep us fighting with each other, we'll never fight the true enemy, the establishment. So as I wrap this up, we should remember and never forget a few things. Anything that keeps us separate and divided from each other is an illusion, so we must transcend illusion. Adyashanti said this quote, amazing quote, "Enlightenment is a destructive process. It has nothing to do with becoming better or being happier. Enlightenment is the crumbling away of untruth. It's seeing through the facade of illusion. It's the complete eradication of everything we imagine to be true." Powerful. And never forget that we are all one. Another quote from David Icke, he said, "I know that you are part of me and I am part of you because we are all aspects of the same infinite consciousness that we call God in creation."
Amen. Love it.
So while there's black power, which scares people who aren't black, and white power scares people who aren't white, this is the only power that scares the establishment.
Right. That's the real power.
Yes.
See that?
So in transcending illusion, we need to gain access to what I call the lost key of power. And that is imagination, which we can also call consciousness expression. It is the lost key of power, an answer to this present reality that we're co-creating.
See?
Investigative reporter and self-help guru, I don't like to use guru, but self-help master John Rappaport, he said, "With imagination, one can solve a problem. More importantly, one can skip ahead of the problem and render it null and void." That's how powerful our imagination is if we let it fly. John Rappaport also said, "If imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, we flattered reality enough. It doesn't need any more. Reality needs a massive injection of imagination."
Yes.
And one final quote from Rappaport, which I think is great. He said, "The most important covert operations are aimed at rejecting this potential of human imagination and making us believe we are dues-paying, card-carrying members of automatic, predetermined life. That's the materialistic operation. That's the spiritual CIA. That's the issue which will decide our future. How much freedom and therefore power will we admit we have? What fake shrunken stories will we sell ourselves in order to slip back into the materialistic cocoon?" This is where humanity is right now. We are on the cusp of something great. We are about to do what centuries of human beings have not been able to do, and that is to get the big picture and realize that we are all one. Can we get the big picture?
It does in my life. It was. So, I'm on in.
Can we go from this to transcending illusion and manifesting, imagining this? It's up to us. Folks, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was great, man.
Great day, my boy.
I didn't even hear the beginning of it.